What's up, my wizards? It's Dev, SBMTG. We like magic, all that stuff you know by now, but I got some core set spoilers to talk about because today was the final day of core set spoilers, which surprised me a little bit, but, be that as it may, we have the entire set at our fingertips to evaluate now. So let me go through all the rest of the stuff that was spoiled today and a couple of things that I've missed in the last few days. Let me go over those cards first, as a matter of fact, starting with Supreme Phantom, Mystic Archaeologist, and Bone Dragon. I want to just devote a little bit of time to these three cards real quick. As far as Supreme Phantom, obviously there's not enough spirit support in Standard right now for this card. Maybe, once we get to Ravnica or another set, that might change. But right now, this is mostly for the modern Bant Spirits deck or even the Blue-White Spirits deck. But more often, I guess you see the Bant one. The only thing about this is that I guess it increases the clock for the Spirits deck, which they probably need, but it doesn't do anything else. And Spirit likes to play creatures that, provide value in some way, like Selfless Spirit or Spell Queller and stuff like that. So I'm just not 100% sure that increasing their clock with a creature that is boltable is exactly where they want to be. But I guess we'll see. People are gonna test that out and see if it works enough. Because the clock definitely does need to be faster in that deck, from what I can tell. Not a Modern expert, obviously, but just looking over the list, it looks like the clock could be way faster, especially in the Modern format. But again, I'm not sure they want to make room for Supreme Phantom. I'm not sure they can drop the slots for a 4 of this. And again, it's very easily boltable, so I'm just not 100% sure that they want this at the end of the day. But moving on to Mystic Archaeologist, this is actually, to me, a little bit better than it might look at first glance. This could go in the sideboard, in the control mirror, which I like, but mostly I don't think it's going to see too much standard play. I like it in limited, though, where it's, a 2-mana 2/1, it's sort of a bear-type creature that can trade in combat in the early game. That's not terrible, but once you get to the late game, this kind of mana sink and limited is actually really desirable. Drawing 2 cards a turn if you have nothing better to do is kind of game-winning in a lot of ways. So I think that Archaeologist is one of the better blue rares for limited at this time. Now, as far as Bone Dragon, Rekindling Phoenix, this is not. That's probably what I've seen it compared the most to. I think it's much slower than Rekindling Phoenix. I don't like that it comes back into play tapped. I don't like that it costs 7 cards, effectively, to get it back, so you'll probably only be able to get it back like once a game. Well, that might be enough. And I do like a big meaty flyer for only 5 mana. I think there's definitely good things about the card. There's also plenty of things that sort of keep it down. Anyone comparing it to Phoenix is, missing the fact that it's a little bit slower, comes into play tapped. And the fact that 7 cards is so much. 7 cards is so freaking much, but maybe possibly as a form of control finisher, especially after rotation. This could be a possibility, but as of now, I'm not seeing it, which surprises even me. I usually love, big, evasive creatures at an aggressive cost. 5 mana for a 5/4 flyer is not the best deal ever, but at least it's a decent cost, and it'll take huge chunks out of their life total, finish the game relatively quick. And it's recursive. I like everything about this creature traditionally, but honestly, I think they've nerfed it in a couple of different ways. Again, coming into play tapped and having to remove 7 cards from your graveyard is just ridiculous. The stipulations are a bit much on this, but I'm not going to just completely say that it'll never see play ever. I think in the right list, there's definitely ways to abuse this, especially lists that put cards into their graveyard very quickly. Or self-mill decks, they're going to be doing that anyway. I think that this is actually a pretty decent threat just for creating some form of card advantage out of your graveyard. Anything that makes you put cards into your graveyard that you can then later get out of your graveyard, I think that's always a good deal. So I've got my eye on the card, but I'm not fully convinced that it's truly good enough. Now, another few cards I didn't get to talk about are 3 cards from the Planeswalker decks that actually caught my attention. And I'm not sure how good they are, but I at least want to bring them up. They are Tezzeret's Gatebreaker, Sarkhan's Dragonfire, and Scalawolf. I really like the name Scalawolf, but Tezzeret's Gatebreaker is a 4-mana artifact, and when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a blue or artifact card from among them and put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And you can pay 6 mana and tap it and sack it to have creatures you control not be able to be blocked this turn. I actually think that this is good. 4-mana artifact is obviously a bit much, but do note that all of these get you some form of card advantage, which I actually really like, especially for a Planeswalker deck card. I think that's a good way to make a Planeswalker deck card. And for 6 mana, being able to just Alpha Strike with all your guys, worry-free, other than, I guess, Settle the Wreckage, is pretty good, honestly. Like, 6 mana is a lot, don't get me wrong, but there are actually things I kind of like about this card. I don't think it's going to break through for Standard or anything, but I think this is one of the stronger, actually this entire cycle, are like the strongest cards they've ever printed for Planeswalker decks, and they're much more interesting than the usual stuff that we get to see. Like Sarkhan's Dragonfire. All of these are a take on when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards and do something. Usually get some form of selection or card advantage. And Dragonfire reminds me a lot of Prophetic Bolt, which is a card that I really like. 3 damage is not enough for 5 mana. That's why it's not going to see any standard play. But especially at sorcery speed, Prophetic Bolt was an instant, and that really made a huge difference. But this is a callback to one of my favorite cards, like literally of all time, so I want to at least bring it up. I don't think that it's anywhere near good enough, but do note that I guess if you're playing Standard Burn and you're looking for options, this is a burn spell that also, gets you another burn spell, so I don't know, it could be worse, let me put it that way. And then Skull of Wolf, this is, again, stats aren't great, 5 mana, 3/3, it's just like Dragonfire, 5 mana, 3 damage. Is awful. We literally have a spell that does that for 1 mana in Magic right now. And in Standard, a spell that does that for 2 mana. So I'm not saying that 5 mana is a great rate for 3 damage or a 3/3 creature, but the the battlefield trigger on the Wolf is just great. Like, really, really good. To look at the top 5 and get a green card. Doesn't even have to be a creature, which is how I read it at first glance. But just any old green card, which is... That's actually decent as far as the battlefield triggers go. Even if they do Lightning Strike it or something, you still got value out of it. So as far as Planeswalker deck cards go, I think these are actually really, really strong, and just a hair away from standard play in some instances. But that's cool. It's nice to give people that are playing with these Planeswalkers decks, these newer players, people still learning, it's good to give them a little bit of power. Now, let's look at some reprints that we got to see today that I'm really excited about. There were a lot of reprints to finish the day off, but there are 4 in particular that I really like the look of. Make a Stand is back, as is Essence Scatter, Gift of Paradise, and Millstone. Now, Millstone probably is not very, impactful whatsoever, but I do like that with, the new Sphinx's Tutelage thing that we saw the other day was a Psychic Corrosion. It's like a better Jace's Erasure, or almost exactly Sphinx's Tutelage. And also with Frank's Sanity in the format, and now Millstone. We've got the tools for at least a casual budget mill deck, and I'm really excited to try and mess around with that and see what we can do with it. See if we can actually make it work, because I love mill, and they really just haven't given it the tools to, actualize in the last God knows how many years. So we're at least going to give it a shot and see how it works. I'm just glad to have Millstone back. Millstone was one of my favorite cards in 1995, so... here it is. But in any case, I'm actually really excited that Gift of Paradise and Essence Scatter are both coming back from this current standard format. Gift of Paradise is such an important tool for ramp decks against aggro decks. Gain a little bit of that tempo back in the form of life. Sometimes they'll attack you with Bomat Courier, Earthshaker, Kenra on turn 2. Turn 3, you'll play Gift of Paradise and more or less negate that entire attack step. It's very important. So glad to have Gift of Paradise back. It's actually one of the more unassuming and yet best ramp pieces that we've seen in quite some time. The extra life is almost, in some cases, like another turn, like a little bit extra ramp in a way. It's not quite another land or anything, but it's 1.3 on the ramp scale, It's not quite just a 1. So I really like Gift of Paradise. I'm glad they're giving it to us again because they realize that it's an important piece for these ramp decks if they're going to be real decks. An Essence Scatter, much the same. This is really important for control decks in these creature-dominated, standard environments. And yeah, Essence Scatter usually comes out against Control, and Control are very popular decks right now, but it's still a very important, necessary piece, I think, for Control to continue to survive against these aggro and mid-range decks in the format right now. So I'm really glad we got that Essence Scatter back. I feel kind of like the same as I do about Negate. Negate is a card that Wizards keeps reprinting over and over and over because it feels like the perfect blue card, perfectly costed, perfectly restricted, easy to understand. Essence Scatter is obviously the analog to that, the opposite of that. And I feel like it's another card that, just like Negate, blue should get all the time in Standard, so I'm glad to see it back. And Make a Stand looks relatively unassuming, and I'm not really sure this is going to do much, honestly, in this Standard environment, although it has seen play before against, 5-mana sweepers. Obviously we have Fumigate in this format, and we've got the other sweeper coming up after rotation that's, either destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. So against those 5-mana sweeps, Make a Stand is actually not terrible. And note that if you're on the play, this actually does pretty good work against a Goblin Chain Whirler. Not good enough work, I don't think, for it to just, completely change the way White Weenie plays against aggro. You don't want to skip your third turn and just hold up 3 mana while they're, expecting their Chain Whirler. I just don't think that's a good play. But Make a Stand has done work before, and it could do work in the future. But of all these reprints, it's the one I'm least happy to see come back. It's just one that I do want to point out because I think that it's possible it could have some kind of minor impact. But on to some new stuff. Let's take a look at Transmogrifying Wand, which is probably the most interesting card from the last day of spoilers. I'm not sure that this card is very good. Let me just put it that way. I especially don't like that it destroys creatures. This would be much, much better if it exiled creatures because of things like, the Scarab God and Rekindling Phoenix, and there's a bunch of stuff in this format right now that I really wish we could exile. I mean, these are some of the most important things in the format, especially Phoenix. And I would love to be able to replace their Phoenix with an Ox, So I think that this may have applications, especially for blue and green decks that want some form of removal against important threats. This could probably be in the sideboard or even in the main deck, depending on what you're doing. The blue-green Constructs deck that focuses on Karn mostly is kind of a blue-green Artifacts deck. And they have literally almost like no interaction whatsoever. So it's possible they want a card like Transmogrifying Wand. You can do it to your own creatures, I guess that's something I should at least point out. Like if you target your own Hazaret or your own Ronus in a green deck with this, then you're just going to make, 3 Oxen by the time it's all over. And that might be worth pointing out too. But altogether, I'm just not sure how I feel about this card. I really, really, really want to like it, but I'm trying to temper my excitement and be a little bit more objective. And honestly, this looks like the kind of card that never actually sees Standard play. But we'll probably see some form of Commander play if I had to guess. We also got Gargoyle Sentinel today. This is 3 mana for a 3/3 artifact creature with Defender, and you can pay 3 until end of turn. Gargoyle loses Defender and gains Flying. So this is decent in Limited, I would imagine. A 3/3 flyer that any deck can play is not bad, and just 3 mana for a 3/3 that can block in the early game is also not bad. But despite the fact that it's not going to see any play outside of Limited, it still looks like a pretty solid Limited card, so maybe play it if you get it. It really depends on your sealed pool, but play it if you get it, maybe. Up next, though, is Talons of Wildwood. I actually kind of like this. It's 2 mana, 1 and a green for an Aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has Trample. And you can pay 2 and a green to return Talons from your graveyard to your hand. I like this. It's not Rancor. It's obviously not Rancor. They will never reprint Rancor as much as I want them to. I want auras to be good, but and I guess you could make the case that they already are, but no green ones. And I don't think this is good per se. Again, I don't think this is going to show up in Standard or anything, but again, in Limited, this is maybe one of the better auras you could be playing. And auras are usually not even good in Limited, where you run the risk of getting 2 for 1, but technically you won't ever get 2 for 1 if you put Talons on a creature. Because even if they kill a guy, you can just get Talons back, and it's pretty good. +1/+1 isn't the most important thing in the world, but Trample is sometimes really good for breaking stalemates and sealed. So I actually do like this card, and it would make for a good, 22nd or 23rd card. If you're trying to figure out how to finish off building your sealed deck, this could at least get some consideration from you. Again, it's not the best card in the world, but as far as auras go, it's a great aura. Because, it negates the rules of auras being bad. So at least there's that. It's worth consideration. Up next is Dragon Egg. I really like the callback here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 0/2 Dragon Egg with Defender. And when Dragon Egg dies, create a 2/2 red dragon creature token with Flying and Fire Breathing. Red, this creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. A sealed draft, it's not too bad. It's like a Windrake that you have to work for, but since you worked for it, it gets Fire Breathing, which is actually incredibly important. My only issue is by the time you block with this and make your dragon, it might be turn 4 or turn 5, at which point they've usually played a bigger flyer than this. So I'm just not entirely sold on it, but it's probably at least worth inclusion in your sealed pool. But on to another red creature. This is Inferno Hellion right here. It's 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 7/3 Hellion with trample. And at the beginning of each end step, if Inferno Hellion attacked or blocked this turn, its owner shuffles it into their library. Well, in almost any format, if it attacked or blocked this turn, it probably died in combat and did some trample damage. I definitely see why they're looking to restrict this card a little bit and give it the shuffle it back into your library clause if it attacks or blocks. But I don't think that it's necessarily worth that much of a nerf, you know. A 4 mana 7/3 trample is not necessarily the end of the world by itself. It may trample over for a few damage, but you're probably going to kill it with whatever you block it with, you know, especially that late into the game. Just about any creature you play for 4 mana is going to have 3 power at the very least. So it's very, very easy to trade for this creature in combat. And again, you might have to take a couple of extra trample damage, but 3 toughness is just not great for 4 mana. So I'm not sure how good this is in the sealed environment, but I guess if you're playing draft and you're trying to draft up a very fast deck, this could be sort of your version of a Ball Lightning. It's obviously nowhere near Ball Lightning, but it's at least sort of kind of a callback to a card like that. You know, a fast attacker that's fragile but can trample over for a butt ton of damage. If this had haste, it would be well worth it and maybe even standard playable, but alas, the way it reads right now, it's only playable in the draft environment, I think. And even then, barely, so keep that in mind. But up next, let's look at Vampire Neonate. This is just a black mana for a 0/3 vampire. Pay 2 and tap it to have each opponent lose 1 and you gain 1. Well, this is going to hit those life gain triggers that you need to hit in your draft deck if you're trying to do all the life gain stuff, you know. It's also just a 1 mana 0/3, which blocks really, really well in the early game, all the way up until turn 3 or 4 a lot of the time. Obviously, no standard play whatsoever, even if you are building a life gain deck. But again, we're mostly talking about limited today, as is usually the case with the last day of spoilers. And I usually hate 1-drops in limited. I'm not a big fan, but this is at least all right. You know, it's a halfway decent blocker. It's a mana sink, keeps you up on life, and it's, you know, a clock. It may be a 20-turn clock, but it's a clock nonetheless. So in terms of 1-drops and sealed, you could do a lot worse. This actually isn't too bad. Up next is Infectious Horror from the Cronenberg universe. This is 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 2/2 zombie horror, and whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 2 life. Well, this is bad. It's fairly bad. You know, when it attacks, you're guaranteeing they lose 2, so it's kind of like a 4/2. But even a 4 mana 4/2 is very bad. I mean, that is a very bad creature, even with the incredible, you know, the super disturbing, awesome looking art that really does look like some David Cronenberg stuff. And even with the, you know, attack trigger, I'm just no. Even with the zombie creature type, no. I just don't think this is a very good card in just about any situation. We also got to see Hired Blade today, who looks like someone, and I can't quite place it. Like, does he look like Inigo Montoya from Princess Bride, or does he kind of look like, Tulio from El Dorado? It's one of those, but I can't quite place it. But in any case, Hired Blade is just 3 mana for a, 3/2 flash. That's more or less it. No important creature types or anything like that, but I think it's kind of cool, again, especially in the limited environment. I'm going to keep saying that over and over. Although the last card we look at today, I won't say that about. It'll actually be I think, constructed playable, maybe, card. But in any case, Hired Blade is able to be played sort of like removal. You know, a 3 mana 3/2, that's actually not terrible stats in draft or in sealed. And when they swing in with something, you can just flash this in and kill. You know, usually something that's either on par with it on curve or a little bit lower. So I'm not sure how I feel about a 3 mana removal spell that's going to take out an awful lot of 2-drops. You're obviously losing tempo on that. So there are definitely things I'm worried about when it comes to Hired Blade. I don't think it's the best card ever, but I do like 3 mana 3/2s, and I do like creatures with flash in limited. So at the very least, this is yet another one of those, 20 to 23rd card that you'll be thinking about for your limited deck. But our final card of the day, and core set in general, is Ether Tunnel right here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked. This is actually fairly decent. There's a reason I saved this for last. This is one of the better cards on the day. There's already a blue-white auras deck that would really like to make its creatures unblockable, and, you know, you get an extra power boost too. I've always kind of liked Tricks of the Trade. And this is just a Tricks of the Trade that costs half the mana, and yeah, it gives you half the boost to power too, but that's well worth only paying 2 instead of paying 4. Tricks of the Trade was awful because it was 4 mana. It won a lot of limited games, but it's not good enough for Standard. But if we're going to play Standard auras, which there are people doing that anyway with blue-white and blue-red auras, then this is probably worth a slot. Again, unblockability is exactly what you want in these decks, especially when you have plenty of ways to either protect your guys or you guys have hexproof or whatever. Aether Tunnel is just, I don't know, I like this card an awful lot, or at least more than a lot of the cards we've already talked about today. And considering there's already an Auras deck in Standard, it could definitely consider this card. That is all of Core Set. So how do we feel about it, guys? You know, get down there in the comments section and let me know. I actually think this set is in some ways more valuable for modern players than it is for Standard players. And there are some Standard playable gems in here, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's just a bust for Standard. But there are an awful lot of good, you know, cards in here for older formats in general. You know, there's some legacy playable pieces in here. There's some modern playable pieces. But I think that the true impact on Standard won't be visible until sometime after rotation, because I just don't really see a card in here that completely, you know, screws mono red or red black, or even a card that just makes control like that much worse or that much better, to be honest. I guess I'll say that much. You know, I don't see much in here that makes mono red a much better deck, and I don't see much in here that makes control a much better deck. I do think that, just like Dominaria, there are a bunch of cards in here that just scream to be built around and just create whole new decks. That's going to be fun for casual players, budget players, and F&M players for that matter. So I think that there's a lot of strategies in here that might just help out people at the F&M level. Again, I mean, we're not going all the way up to the, you know, the GP and the Pro Tour level with some of these cards, but there are going to be things that F&M players really, really enjoy in this set, and they're cards that'll help them out. So, and that's mostly the audience I look to serve, is those players a little bit closer to the ground that want to play competitively, but aren't necessarily looking to go to a Pro Tour anytime soon, you know. So I think that as far as my target audience, there's a lot of really good stuff in this set, a lot of cool build-arounds, and a lot of decks that I can't wait to brew up. So, you know, keep in touch with the channel. Make sure that you're subscribed if you haven't done that yet. Like this video if you enjoyed it. And get down there in the comments section and let me know how you feel about not only the cards today, but the set at large. And I guess that I am tapped out for now. Just make sure you do all the rest of the stuff, not only like and subscribe, but follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. Throw me $1 on the Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG, or visit my sponsor, TCG Player. Link in the description for that. Pre-order prices are getting a little bit out of control for this set, but they're still relatively tame on TCG Player. So if you want individual cards on pre-order, or you want a pre-order sealed product, they're the best place to do both of those things. So check out the link in the description, because it helps me out when you do that, and honestly, helps you out too. Cheap cards is good. Also, quick update, in case you're interested. Yes, I'm still hurt. I've got costochondral separation, they say. It's basically where you either impact or, in my case, cough so hard or so often that your ribs separates from the cartilage. I do have some painkillers for it, but it's still pretty bad. Like, that's the entire reason that I didn't set up shop to do this video today. Instead, I just decided to, you know, put everything up in front of a graphic so I could sit here with ice on my back and shirtless, which is super sexy. Sorry to put that image in your head. I apologize, but it's much more comfortable this way. But once we get down to the top 20 and the top 10 sleepers and the deck techs and stuff, then I will set the studio back up, and I'll get back on camera for you guys. But I really appreciate in the last video, the comment section, you guys giving your support, telling me, you know, oh, we do care that you're hurt and all that stuff. That really, really helps, guys. So that made me feel good. I appreciate that. Anything to feel better from this, because in case you didn't know, rib pain is excruciating. And even though I sound like I'm talking well right now, talking is one of the few things I can do. Moving, a little bit harder. You know, getting up or sleeping, I haven't actually really slept since I injured myself, because it's almost impossible to sleep. Coughing hurts so bad. So I just really appreciate all of your kind words and all of your concern. It meant a lot to me. And I really appreciate you guys sticking around for this little bit at the end of the video. But in any case, I will get better soon. Apparently, this particular condition, it lasts for up to 6 weeks or so. Even 12 weeks if you don't take the right steps. But apparently the pain begins to subside in just a few days, 3 or 4 days, 5 at the most. So hopefully I'll be back in relative working order here very soon for you guys, and I'll get the brews running. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. And I'm pretty sure I'm done babbling for now. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Really, thank you for watching. Spread love and be kind.